It is time for Cleared to Play. Take you inside the tent, speaking of injuries. Get you updated on the latest injuries in the Bay. Proud to partner with UCSF Health on this segment and bring an associate professor of orthopedic surgery, our guy, Dr. Nirav Pandya. Hey, Doc, what's going on?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
We are fantastic, man, and we have been waiting for this moment because we've been having all kinds of conversations about Nick Bosa, and super curious to know what you think about him missing time for training camp. In your opinion, does that mean, like, if he has lesser time to build up for week one, does that make him more susceptible to injury?
It's a great question. I think if you look historically at kind of some of the players who've held out, and this is kind of like a group of like 50, 60 players who've held out over the past 15, 20 years, you do see a slight increased risk of them getting injured, and a lot of that potentially has to do with the fact that they're not doing live game reps. But the good news is a lot of those injuries aren't your catastrophic ACL injuries, ankle fractures, things like that. It's a lot of soft tissue injuries. So if Nick Bosa were to potentially have issues, it would be the hamstring, the groin, et cetera, because you're just not doing those live game reps. But when you look at those same players and you look and see what their performance actually is, players who hold out, if they don't get injured, actually perform better. So there's this balance. So probably because they're not breaking down their body a lot in training camp, maybe there's something going on in terms of rest that allows them to perform. So if he can thread that needle and not get injured, we potentially may, based on this limited data, see a better season from Nick Bosa if he doesn't get that soft tissue injury early on.
Yeah, we'll have to keep all eyes peeled when they actually get him on real football action against Pittsburgh in the opener. Elijah Mitchell back at practice this week with the adductor, with an ADD, not the learning disorder, but the adductor situation. What's the relapse possibility like for him as he returns to play?
I think for a regular player who hasn't had multiple injuries, I think that the general risk of this injury, probably around 5 to 10%. But with Elijah, given his MCL injuries in his knees and all the various other things that have gone on, I think the relapse risk could be a little bit higher, particularly since that adductor runs kind of right where the MCL is, kind of on the inside of the leg. So I think they'll probably, hopefully, play it slow with him, not get him back into too much explosive stuff, maybe take that time before the season starts to keep him healthy, as opposed to having him suit up potentially on Friday and take a lot of snaps. So relapse rate definitely a little bit higher for him, but hopefully they play the slow game and get him ready for the season.
Doc, looking at a couple other 49er situations, I know we've already sort of been over the Ray McLeod thing and whether or not that's realistic to think he could be back by week one. Let's check in on that and also add in Danny Gray with the SC joint injury. What do you think about those two injuries and whether or not they'll be available early in the season at all?
Yeah, the Danny Gray injury definitely is one of those injuries we don't see too often. When you get this kind of collarbone injury, most people either break the collarbone themselves, or what will happen is they'll have a shoulder separation, which is kind of where the collarbone attaches, up to the outside part of your arm. These SC joint injuries take a lot of force to actually happen, and there's some degree of tearing of those ligaments. And if you have a pretty severe injury, it can be 6 to 8 weeks. Typically, a mild one could be 1 to 2 weeks. So I think they'll probably, just due to the fact that it is a very kind of susceptible area to get hit, probably be a couple weeks before he gets back out there, but it's definitely a rare injury. We don't see it too often in NFL players at this early time of the season. For Ray McLeod, I think with any kind of broken bone, you're thinking 6 to 8 weeks minimum, and then it's just a matter of how are you able to get your strength back, how effectively are you going to be. So I think he's kind of a little bit more longer term, potentially seeing Danny Gray a little bit earlier, given the fact it's more of a soft tissue injury than a broken bone.
George Kittle also dealing with a little bit of an adductor. Is your sense that they're just playing it safe with him in the preseason and that he should be fine come week one?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was last time, I think it was maybe even in the middle of the season, he missed a couple weeks with a similar adductor type issue. I don't know if it was on the same side or not. So I think especially the way that he plays, where he has to kind of do multiple things, where you're blocking and you're catching and you're exploding, you're really straining your body in multiple ways, probably safe to kind of rest him up as well, too. I think every year at this time, a bunch of these soft tissue injuries kind of pick up and a lot of people get concerned. And then we suddenly get to the end of the season and they're very healthy. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the things that they're doing early on in the season, even though a lot of fans may be thinking that, why are they getting so injured? I think just the natural course of being in training camp and getting ready for the season.
Doc Pandya with us, cleared to play on Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. We do it every Tuesday. Doc, there's now a forearm strain for Brandon Crawford. And we can add that into all of the things we've been discussing with Brandon Crawford through the year. And at his age, I wonder what your reaction is to just this flood of injuries that we've been seeing.
I think it's just the nature of being in kind of your mid-late 30s, having played a lot of baseball, really grinded away for many years. And I think, the strains, knee inflammation, things like that, these are things that just add up from playing this many games year in and year out. So luckily none of this is kind of career altering, but when you get these little injuries, what you worry about is then are you going to compensate somewhere else? Is this left forearm strain going to lead to an elbow thing? Is going to lead to a shoulder thing that leads to a back thing? So I think taking the extra time to allow him to rest and recover so you don't get those secondary injuries is important. Each of these individual injuries aren't that serious, but definitely the toll of playing this many years at a very explosive position is kind of catching up a little bit.
Doc, great stuff as always. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Okay, that's Doc Pandya, and the proceeding was sponsored by UCSF Health.